Hello and welcome to the animation video for Thursday. So on Tuesday, we had some presentations I wanted you guys to look at and make some comments in the website forum. We talked about using the camera tool to do a zoom in and zoom out, as well as camera rotations and pans. And so there's a video about that, and then there's a link here to an Adobe Animate website, which has some basic information about how to use the camera. Of course, we had a cognitive drawing exercise, and I asked you guys to remember to finish your secondary action exercises from last week. And here's a couple of examples of students who have done that. There was a link to a cool flipbook animation and a cool animation by Studio Ghibli. So today, Thursday, we have Nick who has a presentation due, and Nick, you can put that in your folder as either a Google Drive or a PowerPoint presentation. Moss's presentation, which was due Monday, is here, and if you guys could take a look at that and give him some feedback in the website forum, I'd appreciate that. The video that I'm making right now will appear here. We do have a cognitive drawing exercise, of course, today, and this one is about just drawing different textures, if you will, different patterns. So you're supposed to take your pen, your tablet, and go ahead and draw these wavy lines, and then these sort of lines with different thicknesses, and these lines that go curved and then straight, and then these hatch lines. And the idea here is to get you used to using these kind of lines in your artwork, so you can use them to make textures in your artwork. Okay, and then we have today's 12 principles of animation video, which is exaggeration, which I'd like you to watch. And then I would like you to do an exaggeration exercise. And so what you want to do is create a character. Let's see, do an exaggeration exercise, animation exercise, animate a character doing an action and exaggerate one of the poses a great deal, as the animator does with one frame of the cat jumping in the video up here, right? And you can see my video for an example, right? Then, of course, after you've done your animation exercise of exaggeration, you can work on your storyboard if you haven't finished that yet and move on to your final animation. Okay, so let's switch over here to Adobe Animate, where I've started doing this drawing of a little cat. I'm thinking this cat is sleeping on the floor. Now, let me tell you what my idea is for this. Whenever you do animation, of course, animating is enjoyable, but it's also very time consuming. So you want to think of ways that you can expedite the process of animating. And one way to do that is to use existing drawings and to sort of warp or bend those drawings to produce some animation. So my idea is the scene here is that there's a cat, he's at home, he's on the floor, and he's sleeping. And the way I'm going to indicate sleeping is with just a squash and stretch and maybe the letter Z kind of coming out like he's sleeping, right? So I can squash and stretch his body so it looks like it's kind of moving up and down, that he's sleeping, and put the letter Z's. And that limited bit of animation will, give us the idea that he's sleeping. Now, my idea is then that some kind of a bug comes in, and it can just be a dot, really, and just kind of starts to fly around here. It just flies around, flies around, flies around. Meanwhile, the cat continues to sleep, flies around, flies around, flies around. And then, sort of unexpectedly, the cat just kind of jumps up, grabs it, with his mouth or whatever, falls back down to the ground, and then just continues to sleep, right? And of course, my exaggeration would be in the pose, which is the highest pose. Once he jumps up, he'd be extremely exaggerated, like the cat in the exaggeration video we saw in the 12 Principles of Animation. And that's how I'm going to do my animation exercise. So let's start off with the idea of trying to do a squash and stretch on this cat to make it look like he's sleeping, and then extend that for as long as we can. So on my screen here, I'm showing 6 seconds at 24 frames per second. So that's not very long. It's long enough to establish that the cat is sleeping and have the flies start to come in. But really, I want to animate it long enough so that he can, so that goes all the way right up before he jumps up and grabs the fly. So maybe what I want to do here is this little controller right here controls how much of the timeline you see. So maybe I want to move it this way and be able to see like 10 seconds. And maybe I'm thinking first I'll animate the cat just doing his sleepy thing, and it'll take like 1 or 2 seconds to establish that, and then we could have 4 or 5 seconds of the fly flying around before he jumps up, right? But this gives me plenty of time to decide, how long I want it to go before I come in and start animating the fly. Okay, so I've only got one cell of or one frame of this cat drawn. So now I'm going to use the scale tool to produce, the look and feel of him doing his up and down breathing motion. And maybe I'll even animate this in twos. So in other words, I'll keep him, keep that frame for 2, and then have him, stretch up, for 2, and then so on and so forth, because we experimented with 1s and 2s, and I like sort of the smoothness of 2s. So that means that the second frame that I have here is just going to be a repeat of the first frame, so I can just say insert frame, and if I look at this, it's just going to basically take that same frame and keep it in place right there. All right, now what I want to do here on my third one is I want to insert a keyframe. And the keyframe will basically put in a new drawing of the cat, but now I can do something like stretch it up. Now, I don't really, I want the stretch to have a couple steps to it. I don't just want it to be he's on the floor, he's stretched, he's on the floor, he's stretched. I want it to have at least let's say 2 steps before it reaches the peak of its stretch, and then obviously another 2 steps coming down, right? And I'm going to try and do this on 2s. So let's see, maybe I'll shorten that to 1 step. So maybe there will be the cat on the ground, then sort of a middle position, and then the high position where he is stretched up. Okay, so now I am on my, I have my first cat lying on the ground, and he's in there for 2 frames. Actually, let me go ahead and enlarge this timeline so it's easier for you to see. So now we see the cat is on the ground for 2 frames, and now these next 2 frames we really want him to move up to the middle position. In fact, I can insert a frame here, and what you'll see is these round circles are keyframes, and then the rectangles just extend that frame 1 more frame. So whatever I do on this frame right here, it's gonna be the same for both of these 2 frames. So now what I want to do is I want to click on this selection tool here, which is the free transform tool. I want to hold my shift key down because that'll mean that it'll keep one side solid and then the other side will pull up. And I want to pull this up. Oops, well, that didn't work. So let's try it again. Maybe it's my option key. Hold on a second. Yeah, it's the option key. So what I want to do is I want to pull this up sort of halfway in between, the set state here, the sleeping state, and then the apex or the height of his little snooze there. So hold down the option key. I'll just move this up a little bit like that. Okay, and now that's going to stay for 2, right? I can now insert a keyframe down here. And of course, turning on the onion skin at this point isn't going to hurt us. We can see that that light blue line back there, that's where he was on the ground, and now we've moved him up a little bit. But now we're going to have another set of 2 frames here. I'm going to hold my option key down, and I'm going to pull this up even a little more, kind of like that. And that's going to be the full height of his sort of snoozing, right? So now, if I turn the that onion skinning off, and I look at this, I can see that he's basically his body is moving up, right? Now, a little trick, we want him to come back down, but to save time, we don't want to have to redraw those. So what we can do is paste them back in and reverse the frames, which means they'll be going in a reverse order. So instead of going up, they'll be coming back down, right? So what I can do is copy all these frames here, all 6 of them, and then go immediately after that and paste the frames. So now we're up to 12. We have these following 6 frames here, right? Now what I can do is I can hold down my shift key and select these last 6 frames and then right click and choose reverse frames. Okay, so what happened was it was the exact same frames, but in the first part here, he moves up, and then in the second part, he moves down, right? So if I want to, I can do the loop on this and hit play and see him do his little, breathing thing, right? Now, obviously he's moving way too fast, and that can be addressed via the frame rate, which is under modify. So I can try a couple of different things. Okay, and that still seems a little fast to me. So in a situation like this, if I'm trying to slow something down, I might just keep cutting the frame rate in half, and then when it gets too slow, just increase it a few frames. So let's see what happens here. Okay, that seems good to me. It seems like he's, definitely sitting there sleeping, right? And it's nice and slow pace, so 6 frames per second works out, right? Now the next thing I want to do, maybe to sort of emphasize the fact that he's sleeping, is use the Z's, the cartoon way of showing somebody's sleeping or something sleeping, right? So I can make a new layer here. I name that one cat. And I can call this just like Z's or something like that. And now what I want to do is maybe make it so that as he moves up, that the Z's kind of uh, are produced, as he's moving up. And then maybe as he's moving back down, maybe they just kind of disappear. So it kind of goes in rhythm with what he's doing there. So what I'm probably going to want to do is, maybe I'll even put a Z here and then a Z here and then a Z here. And then maybe I'll just have them each kind of disappear. Like maybe I'll have each one appear at these 3 places and then do the reverse and have them disappear here. It'll kind of coordinate that, right? So here I've got a blank keyframe. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on my pen tool because, I could use a font, but it just seems like a hand-drawn Z might be a little better. So let me start out by putting a Z here. Now, one thing is, you could have the Z just kind of appear, or you could have it be revealed. Now, there's a little trick that I can do here, where I can reveal the Z's and then hide them again. And it's a clever little trick you can do in programs like Adobe Animate. So let me show you what it is. In a case like this, I could draw the first Z and I could leave it on the screen. I could draw the second Z and I could draw the third Z. Or I could draw all the Z's at once and then do put basically a white box on a layer on top of it and cover up all the Z's and then just animate the box to move up to slowly reveal the Z's and then have the box come back down to sort of hide the Z's, right? So, I'll show you what that second method is because I think that's a kind of an interesting way to go. So that means what I'm going to do on this first frame here is I'm going to draw all 3 Z's, and I'll start them, small and then bigger and then the biggest one, and then I'll do that box. Okay, so let me go ahead and draw the Z's. Okay, so there's my Z's, and you can see that that kind of, took over the whole length of the animation there, right? Now let me go ahead and make my block here. Okay, actually I just had to pause for a second because something happened with the recorder here. So let me go ahead and reset up my Adobe Animate screen so that you guys can see where I was. I was just about to make the block to cover the Z's. Okay, so here I am back with my Z's, And now I want to make a block that reveals those. So what I'm going to do, I have to move my program over a little bit so I don't accidentally hit the record button, pause it. I'm going to go ahead and click to make a new layer. Once again, let me just realign my layout here so I can get away from that stuff. Okay, here we go. We make a new layer here, and we're going to call this block, and we'll make a new a box here. Okay, I'm going to have to shrink my width a little bit so I can get everything on this screen. What you guys can't see is that there's a record button over here in the lower left corner, and if I'm not careful and I click it, it'll turn things off. So what I want to do now is I want to switch my fill color to white. I want to go into this block layer, and I want to make a block, a white block, essentially, which covers all the Z's. So that's what that is right there. Now in Adobe Animate, you can turn something into a symbol, which will make it an object that can be animated. So I'll just call this blocky or something like that. And now you can take that symbol and animate it. So what I want to happen is between this first frame and the sixth frame, I want to insert a new keyframe. And then on this first frame, I want the block to be, hide everything, right? But then by the sixth frame, I want to click on the block and hold my shift key down. I want it to have completely revealed all three Z's, right? So instead of animating each Z on the screen, they're there the whole time. I'm just covering them with a white block and then moving the white block up. Now then what I want to do is right click inside of here and create what's called a classic tween. And a classic tween creates the movement in that box so that it moves up over time. Now, initially I was thinking that I could have the box reveal them, and then I could reverse the frames and have them disappear, have the box basically just come back down. But I thought it might be more fun to have them disappear completely, like fade out. So what I can do is, in this case, what I'll have to do is I'll have to actually make the Z's into their own symbol. So I'll turn off the eyeball for that top layer, select the Z's, and convert that to a symbol and call that, Z. And now what I can do is I can make it so that the Z's are just fine in this first half. They just hang out on the screen and get revealed, by the box. But in the second half, I can insert a keyframe right here, and then insert a keyframe at the end of the whole thing here. And what I can do is I can make them be completely opaque here, but I can click on this on the screen and go over to my properties. Let's see, click on that on the screen, go over to color effect, click on none and change it to alpha, and change that alpha all the way to 0. And so what that'll do is it'll make them completely transparent at the end of this second sequence here, and completely visible at the beginning of it. And then if I right click in between them and do create classic tween, it changes things from this keyframe to this keyframe, so from visible to transparent. So it just kind of fades out. So now if I loop this, we see I have this kind of, the Z kind of goes up and then it fades out, right? Okay, now what I want to do next is I want to take this and I want to repeat it so that it goes like 10 seconds so that I have plenty of room to do my other stuff with my fly. So what I can do is click on this first frame here, hold down my shift key and click on the last frame and right click and just do copy frames. And then right after that, I can select an area and do paste frames. Select an area and do paste frames. It doesn't have to be the exact right amount of frames. It just has to be at least as many as are necessary to fit this thing in here, right? So we do this, holding down our shift key and pasting it in. Okay, so each segment or section, if you will, each section, which includes 2 segments, right? This is a section from the first frame to 2 seconds, and basically over the first second, he moves up and over the second second he moves down, and over the first second the Z's are revealed, and then they're disappear. So we have that kind of loop happening through here, right? Now the next thing we want to do is we want to bring the fly in, and we also want to draw what's called a motion guide. And a motion guide is a line that you draw in that you stick an object to, and you can animate it along that, right? So we'll go ahead and we'll click here to make a new layer. Theoretically, that's what's supposed to happen. Okay, here we go. Click. I'm clicking, and Zilcho-matic is happening. So I'm not really 100% sure what's going on with this. Oh, I think what's happening, once again, it's the recorder. It's a giant pain in the butt, really. Yeah, it was the recorder. I was accidentally clicking on that. So let's go ahead and call this fly, and then the layer above it we'll call guide. Okay, now I have already drawn a little fly guy, and I'm going to put him in. What I'm going to do is let the cat have one round here of sleeping, and then here I'm going to insert a blank keyframe. This is where I'm going to insert the fly, and then at that same point is where I'm going to insert a guideline. So I'll insert a blank keyframe there. Now the fly is just going to be a very simple drawing that I make, and I'll just bring it in. But essentially, you know, the fly is just a little black blob with a couple of eyeballs here, and then two wings. You know, so it's like your most generic possible fly, like the flies you drew in grade school, right? So I'm going to bring him in right now, and he's going to sit over here. And then I'm also going to bring in a guideline that I drew. And a guideline would be, you just go up here to the guide layer and click on your brush tool there. And a guideline is really just a line that you draw that is the path that you want the shape to follow, right? The fly to follow, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just paste those in because I created them already. So let me go ahead and open up. Let's see, this is exaggeration 2. So I'm going to open exaggeration 1. You can see that there's some more stuff going on in this one than what we have there. So what I'll do is I'll copy the guide layer, which is you know, this line that I just kind of drew in there. And I'll copy the fly, which is that little guy right there. I'll copy those two layers. Let's see, copy frames. And then I'll try pasting them in here and see if this will work. Paste frames. Okay, looks like it did. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm sort of reverse engineer this a little bit. So like I said, I just drew a fly. If I can turn off this guide layer here and go back to here, you can see, you know, that my little fly is nothing very exciting there. It's just those 3 lines basically, right? And then I drew the guideline, which you can see is just, you know, a wavy line, all right? Now, the trick here is to make it so the fly follows the guideline. I'm going to show you how to do that. So the trick here is I have to turn this off from being a guide so that we can sort of start over. All right, so if you're following along and you want to do this, simply draw yourself a fly. Maybe draw him. Let's see if I can show him starting off over here. There. Okay. Maybe draw the fly off on the right-hand side of your stage. You know, insert a blank keyframe here right after 2 seconds and draw him there off the screen, right? The next thing you want to do is highlight your fly and go modify, convert to symbol, and give him a name, name him fly, okay? And then he'll be a little symbol. We need him to be a symbol. Okay, after that, you can go up to the layer you created called guide. Make sure there's a blank keyframe here. Grab your pen tool and go ahead and just draw a swoopy line for the guide, all right? And what's going to happen is your guide will continue over all the way to the end of the animation, and then your fly will be here. Now, I think what I'm going to do is move the tween here so you guys can see this. Okay, so the next thing you want to do after you have your fly and you've just drawn him down here, and then you've drawn the path, which takes up this whole space here, is you want to go in and you want to go down to the very end of the fly layer, and you want to right click and you want to insert a keyframe at the very end of the fly layer, and that'll be right here, this guy right here. Now what you want to do at that point is you want to take your fly and you want to drag him all the way to the end point here of the line, right? So in other words, let's see, it looks like something got kind of jacked up here. Yeah, I accidentally clicked on something. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so what you want to do is at this very first frame here where the fly appears, you want to grab onto the fly and you want to take this center point. You want to kind of snap this so that it's like on the center point of this line here. Now, this becomes a little easier once we turn this this guideline into an actual Adobe Animate guide. So we'll do that by clicking on this and right-clicking and just saying guide, right? That's going to turn that into a guideline, and now we grab the fly and we click on it and we drag it up and over so it's underneath the guide layer. And then that changes to a dotted line. All right, now take your little fly, which is on this first keyframe here, click on it and drag it and kind of snap it so that the center of the fly is basically on the center of this line right here, right? Okay, now what you want to do is go down to this last keyframe that you made, and what you'll see, your fly will still be here in that keyframe. I've already moved mine, but you'll want to move yours. So once your fly, once you're down here at the very end, right, click on your fly, grab him. I'll go ahead and move mine back here so you can see this process. Okay, I'll just grab my little guy here, drag him like this. Okay, so okay, so if you go down to this end frame here, your fly will probably be like, you know, stuck to this little line here or somewhere about that, right? So what you want to do is you want to take him and you want to drag him all the way over to the end of the line, right? And it may take you a few screens to do this, right? But you want to take him, and then once again, you want to take that center point, you want to kind of snap it to the center point of the line here. And I know it's hard to know if you've done it, but just try and get it so it's kind of centered up with the line there, okay? So now we have is the guideline, which is there the whole time, and we've turned it into an Adobe Animate guide and indented this layer beneath it. Then we've got the fly who starts out over here, and we've kind of snapped him to the beginning of the line. And then at the last keyframe, we've snapped the fly to the end of the line. Now what happens if you right-click in this area between them and you say Create Classic Tween? Now it animates the fly from this position to this position, but instead of moving in a straight line, the fly follows the guideline. So if you look carefully, you can see that little fly following the guideline like that, right? Okay. So, and if we want to see what that, you know, animation so far looks like, we can turn off the eyeball, go back to the beginning and click play. So we have one cycle of the cat, you know, his body going up and down, the Z's, and then the fly comes on and he does his whole, you know, routine and ends up there. So now there is where we want the cat to jump up in an exaggerated pose and bite the fly. Well, what that means is we can't have the cat sleeping during this time he has to jump off, so we have to grab this last round of him sleeping and basically remove those frames. Okay, so what's going to happen is he'll be sleeping, the fly comes on the screen, it moves around, and then from between here and here, we'll have the cat leap up and meet the fly right there where he basically chomps him, right? Okay, so what will be helpful for me, since I need to draw the cat basically jumping up, we don't need any more Z's and we don't need the block anymore. Those, we're done with those. So everything else from here to here is just going to be cat jumping. So we can turn on our onion skin and then insert a blank keyframe. And then the first thing we'll do is draw the cat, you know, slightly out of this position, starting to move up. We have this many frames to get him let's see, what frame are we on now? 49 to 60. So we basically have 11 frames to get him to the peak of his jump. So 11 frames is a lot. It's a lot of time that we have. Just think about doing 11 different drawings. But if you think about it, we've been animating this on twos. So that means that each drawing can be 2 frames. So that really makes it 5 drawings. And then there's sort of an extra slop drawing there at the end. Maybe we'll make that a super exaggerated one at the end, right? Right here, maybe he'll be super exaggerated. So each one of these can last 2 frames, and there will just be 5 of those. So 5, we have to figure it out. So it takes him 5, basically 5 double frames to get to the top, and then we'll have the most exaggerated pose right there. Okay. Okay, so there's several ways that you can do this last section here. You could just make the first drawing and make the second and make the third, make the fourth, and hope that you kind of end up in the right spot. Or you can use one of the techniques we learned earlier in the semester, which is basically, you remember we talked, there was a time when we moved from position to position, and then we moved from frame to frame, right? So what we could do, and this might be a good way to go, is we know that these 2 frames right here are going to be where he's almost all the way up, and then this final frame is going to be him at his most exaggerated, basically chomping the fly, right? So what we could do is we could draw this one, and then let's see, so then there's going to be, let's see, a total of 5, right? So that means that there is, if we don't include this one, that means that there is going to be sort of a midpoint, which is the 3rd one. So what I'm trying to do is figure out where I can make these sort of key drawings, and then I can animate in between them. So we know here that he's going to be fully up, and we know that here he's going to be almost fully up, and we know that halfway in between he's going to be right in the middle. So I can start, go to the end and make these couple of drawings, and then make that middle drawing, and then I can go ahead and fill in what are called the in-betweens, and hopefully that will provide for a smoother animation, right? So here's what the cat looks like. Here's where he's starting. Now, I can turn my rulers on here by view rulers, and then that can give me a little help with positioning for the cat, right? Like, I know that his tail is going to be here, and I know that his head is here. And so I know that as I animate him up, I want to move him, within these guidelines here. I don't want him to go way over there or anything. So let's say we go down here to this very last frame, insert blank keyframe. And then let me get another good look at the cat here. So let's see, he's got an oval face, little ears, and then that little body, right? Now, of course, here he's going to look really kind of exaggerated and weird, but we at least need to know kind of what he looks like. One of the disadvantages of doing this type of drawing is you don't have all the onion skin drawings up until there to help you out. Well, actually, I take that back. If I just drag the onion skin like this all the way back, I can see my cat, and that'll be helpful for me when I'm doing this final drawing here. So let me make an attempt at doing a drawing that I'm happy with in this very last frame here. Okay, well, the first thing I see is that I moved my I made my brush much smaller, so I have to take it back up to where it was. So what I'm thinking is, I'm thinking that maybe this sort of oval head becomes an oval the other way, going straight up. Maybe it's even just his mouth or something like that. Maybe what's happened is he's just chomped on the bug. So I can sort of go backwards and say this is the chomp screen, like, or maybe he's happy that he's chomped. Maybe he's happy that he's chomped the bug So maybe not a frown, but maybe a smile, a little smile. And of course, he's exaggerated here, so that means that uh, his eyes might be like that, and his nose is like this, and of course, he's got these little ears, but they're going to be exaggerated here into bigger, slightly bigger ears. Okay, and then his whole body is going to be exaggerated as well. So even though it only took up a small amount of space here, it's going to stretch all the way down to the ground here. So, I can draw his body. And remember, this is the exaggerated pose. So, and then I can just kind of do one paw like this, and then another paw like this. And then I can have his legs kind of exaggerate the heck out of the legs. It's kind of a weird leg there. Okay, let's just, yeah, this whole thing, it looks like he turned into a giant teddy bear. Okay, I gotta undo that because I'm not happy with that. I'm okay with the body. Maybe I just kind of let's see, figure out what I'm gonna do with this cat's arms here. Maybe I can give him some little paws here on the underneath. Okay, and then there's some little paws going like this. And of course, we can't forget the tail, right? Okay, so there's our kitty cat jumping up. And of course, we want to stretch him as much as possible. So we can click on this tool here, a selection tool, select the entire cat, just like that. And then let's see. It looks like I got the fly too. I don't want the fly, so I'm going to lock the fly so I don't accidentally get him. So now we can click on the scale tool and we can stretch him because once again, this is all about the exaggeration, right? So we can stretch him, but we can also angle him because he's probably going to be angled as he moves up like this. Um, and of course, we can get rid of that fly later on, But let's go ahead and move this up a little more exaggerated. And so, that's the whole point of this exercise is see how much you can exaggerate that, right? Okay, so, at this point, we'll get rid of the fly. We'll have it so that he's chomped it, right? Now, we're animating in twos, so that means that we have to insert a blank keyframe here. And this is where he has to chomp the fly. So that means that wherever the fly is at this location, let me go to the playback head here. So the fly is right there. He basically needs to have his mouth open right around the fly at that point so that it looks like he's grabbing it, right? So let me go ahead and do that. So we can see where he ends up. I want to be drawing here. And I basically want to have him so that he's got his little kitty mouth open. This is like the most not kitty mouth thing you've ever seen, but we'll go ahead and do this. Let's see, let's get those ears in there. This once again is very exaggerated. Um, I like the idea of this mouth being really huge like this to get the bug. Of course, we got to put his nose in there, and we have to do some kind of line that shows like the inside of his mouth, uh, kind of like this. Maybe if I added some color, that would look a little better. We could differentiate between like sort of a tongue and a whole part of the mouth, right? So, but anyway, let's just say that that's going to be him opening his mouth. Maybe what looks weird is that this line needs to come down more like this. Let's see. Okay, so I won't spend too much more time on this. It's easy to obsess about these tiny details, but who really cares? Okay, so there he is. He's opening his face to the cat or to the fly, and he's going to chomp on him, and he's going to be gone in this next scene. Of course, we have to put his body in. We got to make arms that look like the other arms with the little paws here. The legs we can kind of replicate from the previous legs. And then, of course, the tail. Okay, so what we've achieved here is we have, we said we're going to do this in twos. So we have, this this layer right here, this frame right here lasts for 2, and then the last one is him jumping up like that. Now, when I look at this, when I see this one right here, it really looks like this should be the one previous to this, because it looks like that's him kind of going to that position. So I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to go ahead and cut this frame. So basically what I'll do is I'll cut this frame, and then I'll go here, I'll insert, and then I'll just paste the frame. Okay, so now we've got, him, this frame right here moves him from that position to this one, and that makes a little sense to me right now, right? In fact, if I want to, then that means that if I move all of this, oh, you know what I can do? I can, since I'm just going by twos, I can just basically eliminate this last frame, right? Let me show you what I mean by that. See, I've got, this one has to be for 2 frames, right? Then I've got this one for 2 frames, and then I'm going to have this one for 2 frames, and then I've got basically an extra frame there, and I've got an extra frame there, right? So I guess what I could do, maybe if I, I'm just experimenting, seeing how this is all going to work out, move that down there. Okay, so now I have 2, then 2, then 2, then 2. Okay, that'll work out. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 frames. Now it's going to take me 4 frames to get him to this position, and then of course he grabs the fly, right? Now what I plan to do after I spend these 4 sets here getting him up to this position is then I'm just going to reverse the frames and have him fall back down to his sleeping position. So okay, so from here, the sleeping position to here, we've got 4 sets of frames, so 4 double sets of frames to get him from here to here. So I can keep, sometimes it's easier to animate backwards, right? Since I've already drawn these 2 guys right here, I can go ahead and put a blank keyframe in here. I can see my onion skinning of what happens before that, and now I can draw him here and have him A, be a little smaller, and B, start to conform a little bit to the position he's going to be in when he falls completely down like that. So let's go ahead and draw this frame of the cat. Okay, so now I have this cat here. Once again, he still looks like a bear to me, like when he became Winnie the Pooh when he exaggerated up here. But okay, and if I want to, I can always turn off my onion skinning. And if this were an actual animation I was doing, I could fix these so that they looked really good, But for right now, just for the purposes of this exercise, it's good enough, right? So we have that cat becomes that super exaggerated guy, right? Okay, and so now we've got three more sets of frames to do here to get him back down to his original sleeping cat position. So, these last couple of sets are going to be me pushing him down and getting him as close to that as possible. And then, of course, this final one here, I want to make it look like he's just moved up a little bit from this position so it's a smooth sort of transition. So let's see, I've got two more to get him down to there to where I have that smooth transition. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a blank keyframe here. And of course, this one, I want to get him, even closer down towards the floor. Okay, and I did a couple things there. I tried to make the tail become a little smaller like it's going to be when it's here, not as high at the end there. And then, of course, I brought him down a little bit. And I'm also making the proportions of his body smaller so that it gets bigger. He gets longer basically as he goes up. Okay, so now I just have one more frame set here of two frames, insert a blank keyframe. There's just one more layer between this and then the transitional frame that'll take him up from there. So I really need to, but see, there's been a sort of a smooth transition here. So I'll probably just put one more sort of smooth transition there, and then the final frame that I'll draw will be like halfway in between these two. So let me go ahead and draw this next drawing. Okay, so now I've got him down pretty close to the floor. The final drawing that I'm going to do in here is basically going to be sort of him at an angle, sort of halfway between this and this. And I'll try to make it look more like this drawing. You can see here that instead of his head being an oval that's elongated up in this drawing, I've started to make it elongated wide like it is here, so it'll make a smoother transition. Okay, so now I'm going to go here and do my final drawing, which will be, like I said, halfway between the sleeping cat and that cat right there. And so I'm going to try and concentrate on making it look as much like the sleeping cat as possible so that there's some semblance of smoothness happening. Okay, I was pretty happy with everything except that last leg I drew. So I know it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing here, but um, Okay, so and this is a transitional drawing, so it's going to be kind of weird. But if I take off my onion skinning here, you can see that I tried to make it so that um, let's get my eraser tool here so I can erase this little line. I tried to make it so it looked like he was transitioning between being on the floor and then having like his arms and legs up in the air. Like I said, you know, this is not something we're spending 8 hours on, so it's not going to be super smooth. Um, but it should look okay. Now I forgot his mouth here, so I'll just let's see. Does he have a mouth in this? No, he doesn't. Okay, so that's good. We'll make him without a mouth there, and then he's moving up. Now he's starting to distort and become the bear, and then he munches the fly, right? And then he'll come back down. Okay, so a couple things I need to do here. The fly is done by here, so it doesn't. Well, I guess I need to take the fly and move him so that. Um, let me see. I need the fly to basically end here. So, or maybe let's see. Yeah, it's got to end here. So, what can I do? I can, and it doesn't look like the fly's in quite the right position there. It looks like he should open up and then, let's see, insert a keyframe here. And then let's see, we can get rid of this last keyframe with the fly, I think. Uh, oops. It just put him back to here. So let me insert a blank keyframe. Well, it's not being very friendly. Let's see, insert a blank keyframe. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, so the fly is here. That's the last you see of him, and then he's gone. Okay, like I said, I can paste in this last sequence of him jumping up. I can use it, reverse it, and have him going back down, basically. So if I take all of these frames and copy them, and then just paste them in here, and then just reverse that, then what should be happening is he's in that sleeping position. He starts to jump up. He eats the fly, theoretically, right? And then he starts to come back down. Now, one problem is I've got him kind of staying up there because I repeated this frame. He's staying up there a little too long. So maybe what I want to do is just get rid of these two, remove these frames, so that what happens is he jumps up, he eats the fly, and then he starts to come back down, right? And then what I can do here is I can just copy these frames of him sleeping, and I can go ahead and put those in here. Maybe a couple rounds of him sleeping. So we get the idea that he's just gone back to his normal routine. Okay, so all right, let's look at this again and see what we're doing here. So the cat sleeps for a round. The fly comes in, does its path, right? Follows its path, which happens up until here, right? Then this whole area from here to here is the transition of him moving up through the air. Oh, looks like that block is in the way. So what I'm going to have to do is get rid of the block here. So we'll insert a keyframe here, and then I think I can insert a blank keyframe here and get rid of the block at that point, right? So okay, so he's jumping up, he grabs the fly theoretically, and then falls back down from the reverse frames, and then he starts snoozing again. Okay, so let's do our loop thing. Let's see, that's on, and then let's grab it and make the whole animation loop. Okay, and then let's see what it looks like. Okay, so I can't get over that he becomes Winnie the Pooh when he goes up there. But so there's some issues with this in the fact it doesn't look particularly smooth or good the way that he jumps up, but it is working and it is the foundation of this exercise. And one of the problems that it has is the slowness really works here for him, but it doesn't work here. In fact, I think I just thought up a solution to that. I think what we should do here is instead of twos, we should animate on ones in this area where he's jumping up. So what that would mean is going in and removing every other frame so that it looks like he's moving basically, twice as fast. So let me do that. Let me go in and remove every other frame. Just take a second here. And that will definitely solve one problem, which is, I can't very quickly make him not look like Winnie the Pooh, but I'd have to redraw him. But however, I can with a fair amount of quickness get rid of all these extra frames so that it looks like he's moving twice as fast, which is really what's needed for this jump. Because when we just watched it, it looks like he was jumping in slow motion, and you really want an action like this, an exaggerated jump, to be fairly quick, to be something that looks like it's happening quickly so that you can get the sense of all that action. Okay, so just a couple more frames here to remove that one. Let's see, that one. Oops. Did I screw up? Yeah, I did screw up. I accidentally went into the area where he was sleeping again. So let's see where that ends here. So everything after 10 seconds, I actually want, I want to undo all my deletes here. I think that's correct right there. Yeah, okay. So then what I need to do is, let's see, I need to move all this stuff over to here. So that means if I just kind of, let's see, delete these frames here. Let's see what happens if I remove those frames. Almost. I think this actually just wants to move one frame forward. It's kind of weird, all this stuff here. Let's see, remove frames. Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to get all these lined up, and it's not perfect or anything, but let's see. So that's where he starts. So this whole thing needs to move over one. Okay, and then everything else looks pretty good with the exception of this fact. It looks like I deleted one file that I needed here, but that's okay. I'm just going to cheat and drag this over. It'll look weird, but that's okay. All right, so now let's see what happens during his jump up. Oh, I just hosed everything because now he's not even hitting the fly. Uh, let's see what happens here. Oh yeah, he's not even at the fly. So what I have to do is I have to move the fly so that he is at the end of his rope, basically around here, and then he's just kind of gone. Remove frames. Okay, and then this guideline doesn't matter at all. So yeah, because I did that change, I had to do a lot of monkeying around here, but now that works, and now he's sleeping. Okay, so let's watch it in context here, and we'll just see that the jump is basically twice as fast as it was. Okay, so and that's it. Okay, so obviously you guys don't have to make something this complex if you don't want to, but this illustrated a bunch of different techniques that we can use. Things like turning boxes into symbols so you can reveal and reveal things like the Z's, turning the Z's into a symbol so we can make them transparent. doing things like reversing frames so we could, make it look like the cat is breathing, taking the fly and attaching him to a motion guide so that he could jump around. Then there was sort of the meat of the exercise itself, where the cat turns into Winnie the Pooh, the bear, jumping up, and then he comes back down and sleeps, right? Okay, so that's pretty much it. Go ahead and do your own version of the exaggeration exercise and put that in your folder. Let me know where it is so I can share that with other students. And please work on your storyboards and your animations. Let me know if you have questions, and I will talk to you again next Tuesday in the next video. Bye now.